My American project is that piece of the American fabric that is not always engaged or amplified in the great American narrative. Looking at those histories, those subjects who throughout the great American project have very often been marginalized. My work over these past 40-odd years has been about amplifying those presences and amplifying those narratives and those subjects in a visually ambitious way that also engages with the history of photography and how photographs visualize and represent the world. That's my piece of the Great American Project. All photographs start with the imagination. I want to make a certain kind of photograph. And you need to actually do it, to have the assurance that, in fact, you can make a physical thing that's the equal of the idea. I would say that I pretty much learned to make photographs by making those pictures in Harlem from 1975 to 1979. Getting to know the community in Harlem, allowing people in the community to get to know me, and trying to make what I felt was an honest representation of African Americans in that particular urban community that in some ways stood in relation to the more, I guess you could say, pathologically driven representations of African Americans. What I came to realize in making those photographs, there was not only the picture-making part, but there was very clearly the social part. How does one insert themselves momentarily into someone's life and come away with something that resonates with some real aspect of the individual? And the success of that work would be that the camera itself disappeared. You don't look at those portrait-based works and think about the camera. So it moves from being a photograph or a photographic object to being an experience between you and that individual. Over the years, I've never completely lost touch with Harlem. The neighborhood began to be transformed, both socially and spatially. The geography of the community began to transform. I realized that I wanted to make work about how this particular African American community, where my own personal narrative begins and where my work begins, was being transformed through those forces of global capital and gentrification. That for me was the tension between the past and the present. And I wanted to try to make photographs about those absences and disappearances as it was taking place. For me, one of the things that this exhibition has certainly amplified is the aspect of history. I've always been working either in response to histories, whether it's a personal history or a larger history, or in a way that seeks to insert the Black subject or the teenage subject or some other socially marginalized subject into that thing that we call history. History in its retelling tends to become mythic. And that is certainly true in the case of the Underground Railroad, because of necessity, those locations, most of them were never known. I had some specific sites that I knew were related, and I started looking at the landscape around and in between those sites trying to look at the contemporary landscape as if it were the landscape of the past, and trying to see through the eyes of a fugitive African American escaping from slavery, moving across that landscape under cover of darkness, not in the full bright light of day. I didn't just want to document what remained of that history, but I wanted to find a way through the imagination to make it resonate through the photograph.